Hi guys, it's Mrs. Wallace. The plan of investigation is an assignment that's up and coming. It's listed on Schoology. So I just wanted to give you a quick kind of overview of exactly what that plan of investigation is all about. It's a little bit of an introduction to your HI. And I thought first I would just give you a sense of some of the pieces of the historical investigation, so you could see how the plan of investigation fits in to the larger assignment. And again, because this is pieced up, we're actually going to be doing parts of it at a time. I just put in red the only two parts that you're asked to do in this very first benchmark. The first part is a bibliography. The bibliography should include 8 sources. It can include the 4 sources that you've already found about your topic, as well as 4 additional sources. And so for our purposes, really focus on trying to find good sources that help support your detailed question. That's a to what extent question. And you might kind of further read about your particular topic. And as you do that, you might try to look for some books in the library, look for some museums that might focus on your particular topic. And then as I give you guys some feedback over the weekend on your proposals, your preliminary proposals, I'll try to also lead you toward particular sources that might work well. But the bibliography is going to be in MLA format, and I'll post a like kind of a guide for that. I'm not at this point really worried about exactly what the format looks like. I'd rather you focus on finding 8 really solid sources. You do not need to do an OPVL, and you do not need to annotate your bibliography. So this is a simple kind of list of the 8 sources. But what we're really looking for is 8 really good sources that speak well to your topic. And we really want you to have not only found those sources, but looked at those sources, read those sources, spent time with those sources. And so that's kind of the how to use the time to focus on that process, more of the reading and the research. And sometimes it takes a while to find good sources. So you will have chances throughout the year to replace some of the sources that you find initially. The bulk of what you guys are doing this time around is also part of the question and plan of investigation. This is a short paragraph that introduces your reader to the question that you're posing. It's an open-ended question, so you go in with the understanding that you don't know the answer to the question, but you're going to be using evidence to draw conclusions. And so the quality of your question and the quality of the evidence that you bring to the table is very much a part of this entire assessment. And the plan of investigation describes what question you're posing, what topics you're going to be researching in order to organize your evidence. And it also suggests to your reader what the purpose of the investigation is, and then what materials you might use. Usually you list about 2 or so in the plan of investigation. And I just wanted to give you guys a quick sample, so that's the reason for this short PowerPoint. The other pieces of the historical investigation, once you pose your question, the next piece after the plan of investigation that you do is called the summary of evidence. This is very, very much kind of a summary of the research that you do. It is from secondary sources, from primary sources, including all 8 of your sources, but it's about a 2 to 3 page overview of your sources and your particular evidence that you pull from the sources. It's either paraphrased or quoted and cited. So it becomes kind of the raw evidence that you will use, and it's often organized into categories. There's also an evaluation of sources. This is something where you do an OPVL of 2 of the 8 sources in your bibliography. The crux of the historical investigation is the analysis. That is where you write in your voice and ultimately consider the evidence the evaluation of sources and kind of consider what the evidence might suggest in terms of an answer to your question. So think of it like sides of a scale where you're actually weighing evidence in order to determine the answer to your question. You guys practiced a little bit with this when you did that Charlemagne assignment. Your ultimate goal in the HI is to essentially establish a conclusion, and it's kind of there at the very end where you pose a thesis or you pose a conclusion based on the evidence. What is it that you found? So to look at a sample, and we'll kind of outline, there's 5 points that happen in the plan of investigation. You're going to give a brief description of your topic, and brief in like a sentence or two. You're going to note kind of the issue that you're really interested in. Because the question is a to what extent question, it will have multiple answers. What is it about this particular topic that maybe has this, what is the essence of the debate in a sense that you're getting at? Provide the purpose of your investigation, indicate how you're going to go about your research, and discuss the sources you're going to actually use. So those are 5 things you're going to do in your plan of investigation. What does this ultimately look like? Okay, so at the very, very top, there's a sample question. To what extent did the 1765 Stamp Act lead to the creation of the Sons of Liberty in Massachusetts? Okay, so first of all, this is a good question because it is debatable. Maybe the Stamp Act led to the creation of the Sons of Liberty. Maybe something else led to the creation of the Sons of Liberty. Maybe key significant people were instrumental in creating the Sons of Liberty. Maybe there were other events, other taxes, or other issues, maybe even events earlier than 1765 that led to the creation of the Sons of Liberty, but you're kind of weighing how much, that's kind of to what extent is like code for how much did the 1765 Stamp Act actually create the Sons of Liberty in Massachusetts. And so even without writing a plan of investigation, if you were asked to research this, you're going to have to find out about the 1765 Stamp Act, how people felt about it in the colonies. Did they care? Were they upset about it? How much, did this have to do with any sort of outburst of colonial activity? And primarily, how much in the area of Boston, Massachusetts, did this really make a difference? And if we find some of the founding documents of the Sons of Liberty, what were they so ticked off about, right? What were they so interested in? So kind of have an idea of what it is I'm going to research, but I assume I don't know the answer to this question, right? It may be is that the evidence will suggest the Stamp Act was the sole reason for the creation of the Sons of Liberty. That's kind of one side of the spectrum. Maybe the question is going to suggest that the Stamp Act wasn't at all related to the Sons of Liberty being created, or maybe it was somewhere in between. Maybe the Stamp Act, along with 2 or 3 other things, led to the creation of the Sons of Liberty. And so the evidence will lead me to my conclusion. In the plan of investigation, and the entire plan of investigation is in this slide. Okay, so your plan of investigation should not be any longer than the single-spaced paragraph that's on this slide. In 1765, the British Parliament levied the unpopular Stamp Act on American colonists. Okay, that is your intro to the topic, right? What's important to know about it? When did it happen? What is it? And it was unpopular. In the following year, groups known as the Sons of Liberty began to form in the colony of Massachusetts. Okay, so we're giving our reader a sense that in the following year, in 1766, the Sons of Liberty, starts to, kind of take form, right? And we want to know, it's a cause and effect relationship. How much did the Stamp Act cause the Sons of Liberty to form? This investigation will describe the Stamp Act. So that's one of the things I'm going to be outlining in my summary of evidence. It's a little bit about the Stamp Act, as well as examine Massachusetts colonists' reactions to it. Is there evidence about how people in Massachusetts felt about the Stamp Act? In particular, I might find some of the people in Massachusetts that I know are going to be responsible for the creation of the Sons of Liberty. Furthermore, the paper will define the Sons of Liberty and assess factors that led to its creation. Okay, so in terms of what I know later on I'm going to be researching and putting in my summary of evidence is going to be related to what is in blue in my plan of investigation. Then I tell my reader what's the entire purpose of this historical investigation. And this is essentially a repeat of your question. The purpose of this investigation is to assess the extent to which the 1765 Stamp Act led to the creation of the Sons of Liberty in Massachusetts, right? I will be deciding how much that Stamp Act led to the creation of the Sons of Liberty. And then last, I'm going to describe sources. And I might know how and what sources would I look up if I want to know about this. There might be primary sources that detail the founding documents of the Sons of Liberty. There might be letters from one individual to another, right, that might have, Sam Adams or somebody who was involved in the Sons of Liberty. There might be things posted in the newspapers of the day, right? That there might be things that suggest that people were outraged. There might be some variety of political cartoons or things like that that might have been in the paper. So I could find a whole bunch of sources, and as I research, I will want to know in my plan of investigation what types of sources will be used. Major sources for research will include Boston newspaper articles from the period addressing colonist views of the Stamp Act, as well as the Stamp Act Crisis by Helen Morgan to provide information about the founding of the Sons of Liberty. Okay, so even though I might have a bibliography of 8 sources, 2 of those sources I'm likely to OPVL later on in the project. Those are often the sources that I'm interested in focusing on. I want to kind of put my 2 or 3 best sources in that last sentence of my plan of investigation. Okay, so that is all you're asked to do for this first part of the HI. The hardest part is narrowing your question. Once you have a very narrow question, the HI is easier to write. So if you are unsure about the question that you're posing, feel free to email me, let me know in class. Maybe we'll spend a couple minutes of class time, kind of with you guys looking at your questions. Okie doke. Have a good rest of the night.